Greetings. What you are seeing on screen happened less than 24 hours ago in the skies over Isfahan and Tehran. And despite what the official Iranian press says, they are not high-altitude planes either. What you are witnessing is the dress rehearsal for a regional collapse. As you and I speak, alarms are going off at the Ministry of Defense in Tel Aviv. The Chief of Staff, al-Sham, states that the current situation and Iran's ballistic exercises could completely change the strategy that Israel might have in mind. When it comes to Iran, many believe that in 2026 we won't get by unscathed and that it's almost certain there will be a new confrontation between Israel and Iran. But the movement of the last 48 hours suggests that someone in Tehran has decided to step on the accelerator. Today we're going to analyze why Iran is lying about its own missile tests, or rather, why they have different versions. What are their militias really doing in the Iraqi desert, and why? The fall of Assad in Syria, which many celebrated at the time as the end of a problem. It has created such a dark void that not even the Mossad can see the bottom yet. Stay with me until the end, because the connection I'm going to show you between the missiles is... And could Iran's exercises be because of the strategy? Israel has been presented with it. Monday brought conflicting reports worldwide. Fars news agency, which is basically the megaphone of the Iranian Revolutionary Guard, confirmed missile launches at 5 strategic points in the country. Tehran, the capital, Isfahan, Mossad, Karomabad and Mahabad. But just 2 hours later, state television came out to deny it. It was all a communication error, not at all. And all that is happening in the skies of Iran right now with all these missile tests that are being carried out, this is what is known in intelligence as ambiguity saturation, among other things. These maneuvers aim to get the defense systems of Israel and the United States Central Command used to the noise. Imagine this, you have a neighbor who goes out to the yard every night and fires a flare. First, you call the police. By the 10th night, you're no longer surprised. By the 11th, you just glance at the window. What your neighbor is firing isn't a flare, it's a projectile aimed at your roof. And by the time you react, it's already too late. Iran is trying to make Israel ignore the launches in order to gain those critical response minutes that the Israeli air defense system needs. But what are they firing with? After the 12-day war in June 2025, the famous Rising Lion operation, the Iranian arsenal was absolutely depleted. They lost almost 60% of their storage capacity. In the previous video, I shared with you the analysis that several experts made about Iran's current missiles in Western media. They estimated that they would be producing 3,000 per month, but these are disproportionate figures, realistically. They now produce about 300 missiles monthly, their maximum accelerated rate. That Israel and the United States destroyed critical facilities, including the famous industrial mixers, which are essential for solid fuel missiles. That forced Iran to go back, in many cases, to liquid-fueled missiles, which need about 20 to 40 minutes of preparation before each launch. That obviously makes them very vulnerable to attacks, both defensive and preemptive, by the Israeli Air Force. However, intelligence reports that have been shared here today in Israel confirm that China is sending tons of sodium perchlorate to Tehran. What is it used for? It's the solid fuel for ballistic missiles, which puts them back into the dangerous business of building the most sophisticated missiles that Iran has. If this is the case, then Iran is not only replenishing what Israel destroyed, it's building missiles with greater range and, above all, faster ignition speed. They no longer need 30 minutes to prepare a launch, now they can do it in less than 5 minutes. Picture the map right now. We're not talking about old Soviet-era missiles, we're talking about the new ones. Kaivar 2 capable of reaching any point in Israel with an accuracy of less than 50 meters. And I know what many of you are thinking at home. Ari? If Israel has the world's best defense system, why should it worry now? That's a good question, and the answer is pure math. It all comes down to saturation. If Iran launches 500 missiles, Israel can intercept about 495, an extremely high rate, the most effective in the world of air defenses. But even so, 5 missiles hitting is an extremely high risk that Israel cannot afford to allow again. We already saw it in June during the 12-day war, where the few missiles that managed to hit caused billions in material losses and unfortunately some human casualties. Now imagine if instead of 500 they launch 5,000 at once from Iraq, Jordan, and Iran. Well, then you do the math on how many could get through and the damage this could cause. And here is exactly the connection that few see, how Iran lost total control of Syria after the fall of Assad. In 2024, they have had to shift their axis of resistance to the east. And look at this fact. In recent days, in the Anbar Desert in Iraq, movements of militias have been detected who no longer wear their usual uniforms. They are camouflaging themselves with the official uniform of the Iraqi army. It's a modern Trojan horse. Under the guise of state forces, they are installing mobile launchers on the border, state forces, launchers. State forces. 1,000 feet swimming in the phase Enameamos, phase you in. Iran has already signed the check for 6 billion euros with Putin. But the planes won't arrive until mid 2027 and in large numbers, not until 2028. It means that throughout 2026, Iran knows it is vulnerable from the air. Their only chance to win or not be left sitting ducks is to launch such a massive missile attack that it forces Israel to negotiate before their air force is intercepted. Is it all or nothing? They're playing Russian roulette with a fully loaded chamber. As missiles fly over Iran, movement in Israel has been quiet and on the ground. Today, hospitals in the north of the country, from Rambam in Haifa to SIF in Safed, suspended non-urgent surgeries and non-essential activities. Of course, what for? To carry out one of the largest war medicine drills in the modern history of Israel. They rehearsed the mass transfer of patients to underground bunkers, activation of wartime hospitalization protocols, and full underground operations for an indefinite period. Ari, but if they were already hit in June and all their nuclear centers were destroyed, why so much nervousness now? Well, it's not nervousness, it's realism after October 7th. Israel knows that in June their arms were amputated, but now Iran is using its own body as a shield, and they've moved the command center to bunkers that not even the most advanced intelligence can fully map. If they fire 3,000, 4,000, 5,000 missiles at the same time, the one we mentioned before, which is the least prepared, would be more vulnerable, and hospitals already have a precise order to prepare for the worst. Airy. Okay, now let's tie this to high-level politics. On December 29th, Benjamin Netanyahu boards the plane to Washington, and he's not going for a courtesy visit to end the year. He's going to present to the United States administration what they call in the Kiria the point of no return scenario. Intelligence sources in Israel confirm that Netanyahu is bringing evidence that Iran, after the June attacks, has implemented survival by dispersal. They don't have large bases, they have hundreds of small laboratories and silos hidden not only in Iran but also in Iraq. Bibi is going to Washington to say just one thing. In June, we gave the regime a cosmetic surgery. Now we need a total amputation before in 2026 the cost becomes unbearable. And the thing is, many believe that the June war ended the threat. Error. Iran has learned, they know their radars failed, that their F-14S are junk, and that their nuclear centers are vulnerable. That's why they've sped up the process. The Israeli doctrine has changed. We're no longer talking about reacting to an Iranian attack. We're talking about the doctrine of the final blow. Israel is seriously considering a massive preemptive attack, not only to destroy what's left of the nuclear infrastructure, but also to directly decapitate the leadership of the Revolutionary Guard. In Tehran, the analogy is clear. In June, we took the weapon away from the criminal, but the criminal is still alive, he's wounded, and he just bought a new bomb. Would you wait for him to use it, or would you go into his house before he finishes assembling it? I'd love to hear your opinion. Please leave it in the comments. That's the question Netanyahu is taking to the White House this December 29th. Israel has a 24-month window of absolute air superiority before the Russian Su-35s arrive in 2027 and 2028. So 2026 is the year when Israel must decide whether to allow Iran to become a North Korea in the Mediterranean, or if it finishes the job it started in June. According to my data, 42% of you visit this channel daily but aren't subscribed. Some of you think you are, but you're not. So check. Subscribing is free, and I assure you it hurts less than reading the news from Cable News Network or British Broadcasting Corporation. But keep in mind, sometimes just subscribing isn't enough to beat the platform and make sure you get notified. When I upload a new analysis, you have to hit the bell. That way you don't have to go looking for me. I'll knock on your door every time something important happens here in Israel. Alright, now we're moving to Syria. Last night, the sky over Aleppo was lit up by artillery fire, and pay attention because the Turkish army has started a massive bombardment against Kurdish positions near Aleppo. The situation has deteriorated in a matter of hours. But it's not just Turkey that's taking advantage of the chaos to try to grab as much as it can. From Syria's northern border, long contested in Aleppo's heart, peace was shattered in Sheikh Maksud and Ashrafi neighborhoods. There are reports of tanks and heavy weaponry deployed by factions loyal to Damascus, the new government of Ahmed al-Shara, firing directly at residential areas. The army has moved reinforcements from Idlib. And look at that detail. The Syrian Democratic Forces, known as the Syrian Democratic Forces led by the Kurds, deny having fired a single round. And they accuse Damascus, that is the de facto government, of creating an artificial crisis to break the April 1st agreement. Why now? Because in troubled waters, as I told you, everyone wants to fish. Total control of the northern border is being disputed among the Kurds, the government itself, and also Turkey. And this is where things get really dark. Images have been leaked of the Syrian president himself, Ahmed al-Shara. Well, the terrorist we used to know as al-Hulani. Personally overseeing the drone preparations, Falcon is getting ready for the so-called deterrence operation. The question is, deterrence against whom? Just a few days ago, 2 American soldiers and an interpreter were killed in an ambush near Palmyra. At first, it was said that Islamic State of Iraq and Syria was responsible, but the latest reports from the past 2 days, intelligence reports here in Israel, suggest something murkier. There is talk of forces affiliated with the Syrian government who might be behind this incident. Immediate consequences: international coalition reinforcements have landed in eastern Syria. The United States no longer knows if the al-Shara government is an ally against Islamic State of Iraq and Syria or an enemy who uses a tie to hide a rifle. But I saw on the news that Shara met with world leaders, even with Trump himself, and that he's no longer a terrorist. Well, if al-Hulani is playing, that's exactly what he wants the world to think, because the facts show exactly the opposite. It's the perfect script for deception. He signs integration agreements with the Kurds on April 1st, yet allows his factions to bomb hospitals in Aleppo and ignores it. When they kill Americans in Syria, it's literally taqiyya. For those who don't know what this is, taqiyya is the name that Islamists give to the concept that allows Muslims to hide their beliefs or even pretend apostasy in situations of extreme persecution or mortal danger. Now, I know that many of you watch the news in the media about what happens here in the region, especially what's happening right now in Syria, and you get lost because you don't understand who's who. Let me explain it to you quickly right now, because the situation is really getting very serious and we're definitely going to have a lot of news about it. Let's start first with the famous Hayat Tahrir al-Sham Ayat Tahr al-Sham. They are the official winners. The new Syrian government controls Damascus and Aleppo, led by its leader, who now calls himself Ahmed al-Shara, formerly al-Hulani, having swapped his terrorist military uniform for silk suits. Do they want the world to believe they are modern politicians? The analogy is it's like a wolf putting on a tie and saying that now it's a vegetarian. They are still radical Islamists. And even though today they are fighting against Iran to take over the territory, tomorrow they could be Israel's worst headache. The Druze insurgency in the south. This is where Israel has had to get involved. In the Suwaita area, the Druze do not accept the new rulers of Damascus. They are proud warriors and have formed an autonomous zone. Israel already carried out selective raids in November to protect this community and prevent pro-Iranian militias from using their territory to rearm. Literally, the Druze are the ones who occupy much of the territory along the border between Syria and Israel. Therefore, obviously, Israel values and cares about protecting them, since they are loyal to the Jewish state. Third, the return of Islamic State of Iraq and Syria. Just as you heard, have they come back? The Syrian army disintegrated, and Islamic State of Iraq and Syria has regained control of areas in the central desert. They are no longer a caliphate with a flag. They are an invisible guerrilla force that attacks and disappears. And in recent days, they've been all over social media because of their terrible attacks against the population, especially the Christian community in Syria, which I'd rather not discuss here. What are they doing? But you can imagine it. They are the most radical and bloodthirsty faction of all Islamic terrorism. Now, I know many will say Ari, but if Hayat Tahrir al-Sham, the Syrian government, expelled the Iranians from Syria, wouldn't that mean they should be Israel's allies? Many on social media think so and say it that way, and I answer them. The enemy of my enemy is always my friend. Sometimes it's just a smarter enemy. Hayat Tahrir al-Sham, or the current Syrian government, wants international legitimacy so that the West will send them money, but their DNA hasn't changed. Israel knows them from the tip of their big toe to the last hair on their head. They're just waiting for Israel and Iran to wear each other out so they can make their own move. Well, and because this is so serious today here in Israel, because Iran hasn't given up on Syria. Since they lost their permanent bases, now they're operating as intelligence cells, infiltrating among the population, buying loyalties in the border towns, and trying to create a smuggling corridor into Lebanon. It no longer goes through the main roads, but through shepherds' routes that Israeli satellites can barely track. So as things stand, the plain reading is that Syria today is a geopolitical black hole. There is no government, there is no law, there are too many weapons circulating throughout its territory. Israel has had to establish a de facto buffer zone to prevent the Syrian chaos from crossing the security fence. So what we are experiencing in Syria and with Iran's missiles are not isolated events. It's the 2026 board taking shape at the end of 2025. Iran uses the chaos in Aleppo to move its pieces in the shadows, while everyone is watching the tanks in Shahara and further north. Turkey, little by little, it is starting to become an increasingly real threat to Israel. Subscribe to the channel to closely follow what is happening here in Israel and in the region. Don't forget to like before you go. See you next time.